When had the woman in the mirror become someone I barely recognized? I stood in our master bathroom, adjusting the pearl necklace Tom had given me for our 38th anniversary, and noticed how the soft lighting couldn't quite hide the silver threading through my auburn hair. Tonight was my college's 40th reunion, and for the first time in 6 decades, I wasn't sure I wanted to see my reflection in my classmates' eyes. "Kate, you look beautiful," Tom called from the bedroom, already dressed in his navy suit. At 63, my husband still had that confident surgeon's posture, though his dark hair had gone distinguished gray at the temples. "Are you ready?" Was I? Ready to face the women who'd become CEOs while I'd spent 20 years raising our 3 children? Ready to smile through conversations about my early retirement from architecture, a career I'd abandoned when Emma was born and never quite resumed? Ready to pretend that turning 61 hadn't made me feel like I was disappearing? "Almost," I said, smoothing down my burgundy dress. It was elegant, expensive, appropriate, safe. When had I become so safe? The Grand Meridian Hotel's ballroom glittered with the kind of understated wealth that characterized my alma mater's alumni base. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a jazz quartet playing softly in the corner. I recognized faces immediately, some remarkably unchanged, others transformed by time and cosmetic surgery. "Tom! Kate! Over here!" Michael Chen waved from across the room, his wife Sarah beside him. We'd been friends since freshman year, back when Tom and I were just study partners who became something more during organic chemistry all-nighters. The first hour passed pleasantly enough, reminiscing about professors long retired, laughing at old stories, showing photos of grandchildren on our phones. Tom was animated in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. He was always like this at medical conferences, energized by intellectual conversation, but lately our dinner table had been quiet except for the sound of silverware. "I'm going to get us some wine," Tom said, squeezing my hand. "Your favorite?" "The Pinot Noir, thank you." I watched him walk toward the bar, his confident stride unchanged despite the years. A successful cardiac surgeon, respected, admired. When had we stopped being a team and become 2 people who lived in the same house? "Catherine Morrison!" The voice was warm, cultured, with an undertone of something I couldn't quite place. I turned to find a woman I vaguely remembered, blonde highlights, expensive suit, the kind of maintained beauty that spoke of regular spa treatments and personal trainers. "Natalie Richardson," she said, extending a manicured hand. Well, it was Richardson. Davis now, though I'm back to Richardson after the divorce. We had political science together, though I think you were always in the architecture studio. "Of course, I remember," I lied politely. "How have you been?" "Thriving, actually. Corporate law in Manhattan. Exhausting, but exhilarating." She glanced across the room, her eyes landing on Tom at the bar. "I see you married Tom Sullivan. Lucky you. He was quite the catch." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "We've been together 40 years this fall. Married for 38. Impressive." She sipped her champagne. "You know, Tom and I have been reconnecting on LinkedIn. He's been giving me advice about some medical malpractice cases I'm handling. Such a brilliant mind." The tightness moved to my chest. Tom hadn't mentioned corresponding with anyone from college, but then again, we didn't talk much about our days anymore, did we? "That's nice," I managed. "He's been so helpful. We've been messaging quite a bit, actually. Even had a few video calls." Natalie smiled, and there was something predatory in it. "It's wonderful to reconnect with old friends, don't you think?" Before I could respond, Tom returned with 2 glasses of wine. His face lit up when he saw Natalie. "Nat, I was hoping you'd make it tonight." "Nat? Since when did he call her that?" "Wouldn't miss it," Natalie said, touching his arm in a gesture that lasted a fraction too long. "I was just telling Kate how helpful you've been with my cases." "Kate's wine is getting warm," I said, more sharply than intended. Tom handed me the glass, looking slightly confused by my tone. "Natalie's firm is handling some fascinating cases," he said. "Remember when I mentioned that pharmaceutical liability case? That's hers." I didn't remember. When had he mentioned it? During one of our silent dinners? While I was organizing Emma's baby shower? When had these conversations happened? "Your husband is too modest," Natalie said, her hand still on his arm. "He's been invaluable. We should grab coffee sometime next week, Tom. That case I mentioned in my email. My email. Not our email. They had a correspondence I knew nothing about. Sounds good, Tom said easily. I'm free Tuesday afternoon. Perfect. I'll confirm the details tonight. Natalie's smile widened as she looked at me. You don't mind if I borrow him for professional advice, do you, Kate? What could I say? That I minded my husband having coffee with a beautiful, accomplished woman who clearly saw him as more than a medical consultant? That would make me sound paranoid, jealous, small. Of course not, I heard myself say. The evening progressed, and I couldn't stop watching them. Tom seemed magnetically drawn to wherever Natalie stood. Their conversations were animated, punctuated by laughter that excluded everyone else. She touched his arm, his shoulder, once even straightening his tie while saying something that made him laugh. How did she know his tie was crooked? I whispered to Sarah when we were alone at our table. Who, Natalie? Sarah's face clouded. Kate, I didn't want to say anything, but she's been asking about Tom. At the last mini reunion, before you arrived, she wanted to know if you two were happy, if he seemed satisfied with his life. I thought it was odd. The wine in my glass suddenly tasted bitter. When was this? 3 months ago. That medical school event you couldn't make it to because of Emma's sonogram appointment. 3 months of correspondence. 3 months of video calls and case discussions, and what else? My hands trembled slightly as I set down my glass. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. In the marble-tiled sanctuary, I stared at my reflection again. When Tom and I had met, I was 21 with dreams of designing buildings that would change skylines. I'd won awards, had a portfolio that made professors call me promising, and I'd walked away from it all because raising children was important, because someone had to manage the home while Tom built his career, because that's what women of my generation did. But Natalie hadn't walked away. Natalie had built an empire while I'd built. What? A comfortable life? A beautiful home? 3 grown children who called on Sundays? When I returned to the ballroom, I found Tom and Natalie on the terrace, visible through the glass doors. The sight stopped me cold. They stood close, too close, his head bent toward hers as she spoke. She laughed, touching his chest, and he didn't step back. I was 61 years old, married for 38 years with 3 children and 2 grandchildren and a mortgage-free house in the suburbs. I'd gained 20 pounds since our wedding day, had smile lines that no cream could erase, had hands that bore the marks of years, spent changing diapers and making dinners, and doing the thousands of invisible tasks that kept a family running. Who was this woman to think she could just step in and take what I'd built? But had I built it? Or had I let it grow complacent, like an untended garden? I walked onto the terrace. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of the city below. Neither of them noticed me at first. Not saying it would be easy, Natalie was saying, but sometimes people grow apart. It's nobody's fault. It just happens when 2 people want different things from life. Natalie Tom's voice held a tone I couldn't quite read. You're brilliant, Tom. You deserve a partner who understands your world, who challenges you intellectually, someone who's still building something, not just, she trailed off, having spotted me. The terrace fell silent except for the distant sound of car horns from the street below. Not just what? My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. Please, finish your thought. Natalie had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but only slightly. Kate, I didn't realize you were there. Clearly. I looked at my husband, who had the decency to step away from her. Tom, could you give us a moment? This seems to be a conversation between Natalie and me. He hesitated, caught between us, then nodded and went back inside. I watched him go, wondering if he'd look back. He didn't. Look, Natalie said, recovering her poise. I didn't mean to be insensitive. But let's be honest here. Tom and I have connected on a level that goes beyond his marriage. We understand each other's ambitions, our drive. You had your time with him raising the family, the domestic years, but people evolve. Tom needs more now. The words should have devastated me. Perhaps a younger version of myself would have crumbled, would have believed that my years of service had made me worthless, but something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling smaller, I felt myself expanding, filling with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. You want to know something, Natalie? I moved closer, my voice low but firm. You're right that Tom is brilliant. You're right that he deserves a partner who challenges him, but you're wrong about everything else. She opened her mouth to speak, but I continued. I gave up architecture because I chose to. I chose to invest 38 years in building something that doesn't have a corner office or a nameplate. I built a family. I built a home where our children always felt safe enough to fail, to cry, to grow. I built a marriage that survived his residency, my mother's death, Emma's hospitalization, the miscarriage between our second and third child that nearly broke us both. My voice strengthened. You see a woman who retired early and think I gave up. But I was making space for myself, finally. I've started taking architecture classes again. I volunteer at Habitat for Humanity, designing affordable housing. Last month, I submitted a proposal for a community center that might actually get built. Tom knows all of this, by the way, because I tell him. We still talk, Natalie, about real things, when we remember to make time. She shifted uncomfortably, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. You think you understand Tom because you discuss his cases? I understand the man who cried at his father's funeral. I know he's terrified of deep water because his brother drowned when he was 12. I know he still has nightmares before every major surgery, worries he'll make the wrong cut, cost someone their life. I know he wants to retire early and take up woodworking, which terrifies him because his identity is so wrapped up in being a surgeon that he doesn't know who he'll be without it. The terrace doors opened, and I noticed several people had gathered just inside, watching. Sarah, Michael, others from our class. This had become public, and I didn't care. You want Tom? My voice carried across the space. You want the version he performs for professional colleagues, the confident doctor who has all the answers? Go ahead. But I'm not handing over my husband because you've decided our marriage has an expiration date. I'm reminding him and myself what we've built. And if after that, he still wants to walk away, then I'll have my answer about the man I thought I married. I turned to face the crowd that had gathered, my eyes finding Tom's among them. His face was pale, stricken. 38 years ago, I promised to love this man through everything. Through the times when love felt easy and the times when it felt like work. Lately, it's felt like work for both of us. We've been living parallel lives instead of one intertwined life. We've let routine replace romance, let silence replace conversation. That's our fault, both of ours. I looked back at Natalie. So thank you, actually. Thank you for reminding me that I almost let the most important thing in my life slip away through simple negligence. You don't lose a marriage in one dramatic moment. You lose it in 1,000 small ones, the dinners where you stop asking about each other's days, the mornings when you kiss goodbye out of habit instead of love, the nights when you sleep back to back instead of intertwined. The terrace was absolutely silent now. Even the jazz quartet inside had stopped playing. But here's what you don't understand, Natalie, because you're measuring everything in terms of resumes and ambition. Marriage isn't about being endlessly fascinating to each other. It's about choosing each other even when the fascination fades, and then choosing to find it again. It's about knowing someone so completely that you can be boring together and it feels like home. I stepped closer to her, my final words quiet enough that only she could hear. I'm 61 years old. I know who I am. Do you? Because from where I stand, you're a brilliant lawyer who's so afraid of being alone that you're trying to steal someone else's life instead of building your own. I feel sorry for you. I turned and walked back into the ballroom. The crowd parted. I kept my head high, my hands steady, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Tom caught up with me at the coat check. Kate. Not here, I said quietly. Let's go home. The drive was silent. Not the comfortable silence of long marriage, but the heavy silence of words waiting to be spoken. Tom's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. At home, we sat in the living room, the room I decorated with such care, the photos on the mantel chronicling our life together. Tom sat across from me, his head in his hands. I didn't sleep with her, he said finally. I need you to know that. I never would, but you were flattered, I finished for him. By the attention, by having someone look at you like you're exciting again instead of just there. He looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. Kate, when did we stop seeing each other? When did I become so absorbed in the hospital that I forgot to come home to you? When did you become so busy being a mother and grandmother that you forgot to be the woman I fell in love with? When Emma was born, I said honestly. That's when it started. We became mom and dad first, Kate and Tom second, and we never found our way back. I was an idiot, Tom said, his voice breaking. Watching you on that terrace tonight, standing up for our marriage with such strength and dignity, Kate, I saw you again. The woman who told off the dean when he said women didn't belong in architecture. The woman who drove 8 hours through a snowstorm to be at my father's bedside when he was dying. The woman who rebuilds our son when his business failed and told him failure was just data. He moved to kneel beside my chair, taking my hands. These hands built our family. They built a home that our children call when they need comfort. They've held me through every crisis of my career, and I let someone make you feel like they weren't enough. I let myself feel like I wasn't enough, I said, tears finally coming. I looked at Natalie's accomplishments and thought I'd wasted my life. But I didn't waste it, Tom. I need to be more than just your wife and their mother. I need to be Kate again. Then be Kate, he said fiercely. The Kate who's designing buildings again. The Kate who has opinions about city planning. The Kate who used to drag me to art galleries and architecture lectures. I've missed her. I've missed us. We sat there for a long time, holding each other, letting years of accumulated distance begin to close. The next morning, we had coffee on our back porch, something we hadn't done in years. Tom had canceled his Tuesday afternoon no coffee with Natalie, no more LinkedIn messages, no more professional advice that crossed lines neither of us had realized existed. I talked to Bill Henderson yesterday, Tom said. Bill was his senior partner. I'm cutting back my hours. Effective next month, I'm down to 4 days a week. I looked at him in surprise. Tom, you don't have to. I want to. I've been using work as an excuse not to face the fact that our life had become empty. Well, I'm done with excuses. We're going to fill our life, Kate. Together. Really together. Not just occupying the same space. I sent an email to Professor Chen at the university, I said. I'm applying to teach a semester of design studio. Part-time, just one class. I need to be around young minds again. People who still think they can change the world. Tom smiled. Really smiled. In a way that reminded me of the boy I'd fallen in love with 40 years ago. You can change the world. You changed mine. 2 weeks later, Sarah called. You should know Natalie left the reunion early that night and hasn't responded to any of the alumni group chats since. Apparently, several people told her she was out of line. I hope she finds what she's looking for, I said, and meant it. Just not in someone else's marriage. The thing about almost losing something is that it teaches you its value. Tom and I started having weekly date nights, not fancy, just us, talking, really talking. About our days, our fears, our dreams for the years ahead. We took a pottery class together and were terrible at it, but we laughed more than we had in years. On our 39th anniversary, Tom gave me a gift that made me cry. It was a framed sketch, one of my early architecture designs from college that he'd kept all these years. Under it, he'd written, "For the woman who builds beautiful things, including our life together, I choose you. Every day, I choose you." I hung it in my new office, the spare bedroom I'd converted into a design studio. Applications for the community center project sat on my desk. They'd accepted my proposal. At 61, I was building again. That evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Tom took my hand. What would you have done if I'd chosen her? I thought about it honestly. I would have been devastated. But I also would have survived. Because that night taught me something important. I am enough. With or without you, I am enough. But I'm glad I don't have to find out what life looks like without you. Me too, he said, pulling me close. Kate? Yes? Let's not wait for another crisis to remember what we have. Let's choose this us every single day. And we did, not perfectly. Some days were still routine, still quiet. But we chose each other in the small moments, the morning coffee, the goodnight kiss, the question, "How was your day?" that we actually waited to hear the answer to. At the 41st reunion, an invitation appeared in our mailbox. We laughed and threw it away. We didn't need to go back. We were too busy building forward together. Finally, the way we'd always meant to.